University, and yet either some mixture of the party scene or mental illness hits, and he spirals out of control, gets terribly addicted to alcohol and heroin, and begins to lose everything. And a very good friend of his, trying to rescue him from the cycles of addiction, invites him back home with him to Alaska. And so the two get on a plane and they fly to Alaska, and they're doing Alaska stuff, all right? They're backpacking into the mountains. They're finding streams and beautiful scenery to look at. And on one of these little expeditions, they come near face to face with a giant grizzly bear. And there's something about that moment for Timothy Treadwell that was intoxicating to him. And so he began to believe that his purpose in life was to protect and help grizzly bears. I didn't know grizzly bears were in a lot of danger, but Timothy begins to, now here's what's cool. He stops drinking, he stops using heroin. He's not like in recovery or a 12-step program. It's the bears. And so he begins to kind of take these trips into the outback to befriend and take care of these bears. And he finds this group of grizzlies that he, in his mind, befriends. He befriends the bears. And so he sets up his tent among them, and he like feeds them, and he tries to coax them in to feed them by hand and pet them. By the way, you can look, there's a whole documentary on this that you can look at after I'm done tonight. Don't watch while I'm preaching. I'm pretty self-confident, but man, if I see you watching a documentary while I'm preaching, that stuff's hard to recover from, all right? And so he has this little family of bears that he adopts, and he keeps more and more ooching towards them and putting himself in significant grave danger because Timothy believed that they were his friends. None of those bears believed that he was theirs. And he gets so confident that he's not in danger that he actually starts like bringing friends, dumb friends, out with him to kind of engage these grizzly bears. And so he's dating this girl named Amy, and he's just telling her all about these bears. Like he's been documenting their movements. He's got video of them. You know, he's like petting one and videoing it and all the kind of selfie nonsense that gets people y'all's age killed now, all right? I'm an old head. I ain't taking a selfie leaning off the Empire State Building. I'm just not gonna do it. And so he brings his girlfriend Amy out to meet this grizzly bear family, and it had been a rough kind of spring, and the bears were agitated, and they had a couple of close run-ins with the bears, and Amy was terrified, and she wanted to get out of there. And so Timothy said, let's get out of here then. But I don't know if you know that there are more roads in the state of Louisiana than there is in the state of Alaska. If you want to get around in Alaska, it's by boat or plane. And so they had to wait for the plane to get in. They get on this little puddle jumper. They head back to fly home, and their flight was delayed. And upon that flight being delayed, Timothy wanted to go back out to the bears, and Amy protests, and then she finally relents, and they go back out to see this bear family. And on October 5th, 2003, Timothy Treadwell and his girlfriend Amy are killed by this group of bears. Now that's kind of a heavy story to kick off a sermon, isn't it? Aren't I supposed to be funny and kind of pull you in with a joke? But here's the needle I'm trying to thread tonight. See, Timothy Treadwell lost respect for the power and might of a grizzly bear. He presumed upon its gentleness, and it took its life. And in a room like this, here's what I'm confident of. In a room like this, we know that Jesus is the lover of our souls. We know that Jesus is the friend of sinners. We knew he moves towards us in grace. But sometimes I wonder if we've forgotten that he sits enthroned on high at the center of reality, and he is the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And the Bible says, at his second coming, the mountains flee his presence. That we are talking about a God that is, as we've sung, holy, 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 and he's so holy that that holiness destroys everything that is not holy in front of it. The covering of Jesus' blood over us is to protect us from the holiness of God that destroys anything that is unholy because it is not welcomed in the presence of God. That's the beauty of the great exchange, that Christ takes the wrath of God off of us by absorbing it, and he imputes to us his righteousness so that when we're in the presence of God, what God sees is the righteousness of Christ. It's the great exchange. Your sin for Christ's righteousness. What you just watched in that water is the great exchange. All of that sin taken. That's why we put him under the water. Didn't hold him under the water, brought him back up. Why? Because Christ's righteousness replaces our brokenness and wickedness. It's the great news of the gospel. In fact, the word gospel means good news, and that's what we just witnessed. Now, why I have us in Hebrews 12 is because the author of Hebrews is going to encourage us to see both things as beautiful. The friendship of Jesus, the love of Jesus, the grace of Jesus, and it's going to hold us fast with the fear of the Lord. Both are necessary for us to, as the text will remind us, run the race that was marked out for us. All right, are we good? That's where we're headed. So if you're type A, that's it. And if you're super type A, I've got 2 points. Run and remember, both with R's. I've got Southern Baptist roots. Now, let's look at this passage. This is Hebrews 12, 1 and 2. Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and the sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. So 2 points. The first one, remember. Now, it just as a general rule of studying the Bible, if you see the word therefore there, you need to ask the question, what's the therefore there for? He is concluding something here. This therefore means he's completing a thought. And so to understand the therefore, you actually have to go back to Hebrews 11. And here's the first thing he wants us to remember. That there is a bigger story at play here than just you and me. We are caught up in something that is bigger across space and time than just our little personal journeys with Jesus Christ. That the creator God of the universe has been at work in the beginning, since the beginning, accomplishing his purposes, and we've simply been invited into those purposes. This is important because as you orient yourself to God, he is not a genie in a lamp to get you, so you can get him to serve you. He has not come so you could live your best life now. He is the reigning, ruling God of the universe, and there is none like him. And he's saying at the beginning, therefore, pointing back to Hebrews 11, which is the great roll call of faith. He calls it a great cloud of witnesses. Now, this great cloud, it's a common metaphor in the scriptures for just a great throng of people. I don't know how many a throng is, but I'm guessing it's a lot. Let me show you a little bit of the family that you and I belong to here. Let's look back into Hebrews 11. This is, I can't read all of it, but that whole chapter will blow your mind. Hebrews 11, 32 through 38. And what more shall I say? For time would fail me to tell of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, of David and Samuel and the prophets, who through faith conquered kingdoms, enforced justice, obtained promises, stopped the mouths of lions, quenched the power of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, who were made strong out of weakness, became mighty in war, put foreign armies to flight, women received back their dead by resurrection. Sign me up. What? I'll take anyone. Shut the mouths of lions? Yes, please. Put foreign armies to flight? I'm in. I got testosterone surging through my system. If that's what it means to belong to the great cloud of witnesses, then I'm in, because it sounds like Jesus is going to make me a winner. You tracking with me? Sounds like he's going to make me a winner. Do I need to read that again? Like, do you see a single L in that list? You didn't. Like, it's like, hey, the great cloud of witnesses. We kick Satan in the tail. Great cloud of witnesses. We shut them out. You want to send a foreign army after me? Bring it on. You want to try to kill me? We receive back our dead via resurrection. What could the enemy do to me? And that'd be awesome, except the text keeps going. Let's keep reading. Some were tortured, refusing to accept release, that they might rise again to a better life. Others suffered mocking and flogging, and even chains and imprisonment. They were stoned, they were sawn in two, they were killed with the sword, they went about in the skins of sheep and goats, destitute, afflicted, mistreated. Listen to this. Of whom the world was not worthy, wandering about in deserts and mountains and in dens and caves of the earth. Here's the big takeaway as we look across space and time at this great family we've been brought into. The success or failure of our faith cannot be seen via outcomes. You tracking with me? Whether or not you are blessed or not blessed cannot be decided by external visible outcomes, because you got the whole back of 11 here that nobody's looking at and going, please make my life like that. Like, did you on the back half go, I'll sign up for that? No, nobody's signing up. I'm not signing up for that. And yet the Bible says that these are the kinds of people of whom the world is not worthy. And so why am I, listen, God, that means that sometimes it's going to go our way, and sometimes it's not. And that does not reveal whether or not we're being good enough or we're bad, or it doesn't accuse God of not being good. We don't control outcomes. We simply move forward in faith. And here, let's make some eye contact. That's the way it's always been. That's the way it's always been. We've just got this little smidge of prosperity gospel that sneaks in if we're not careful. Like, if I follow Jesus, I'm going to be a winner. You might not look like it. Now, here's what I'd say. Yes, you are eventually. Might not look like that for a while. But in the end, King Jesus reigns and rules. You and I are a part of a great cloud of witnesses. And here's what I want to highlight about that remembrance. As we look back on it all, either biblically or historically, what you'll see staring you in the face is the faithfulness of God, regardless of visible, manifest success or failure. You see the faithfulness of God in and through suffering. You see the faithfulness of God even when it looks like the people of God are losing, they're winning. In fact, I'm pumped that Louis going through the book of Revelation. That's the whole point of the book of Revelation, is don't believe what you see. Christ is enthroned. Don't believe what you see. We have won. It's almost over. Remember, you and I are part of a great cloud of witnesses made up of men and women from every tribe, tongue, and nation on earth. We are a part of the household of faith, the people of God. And he's saying here, don't forget that you're caught up in something bigger than yourself. There are few things as devastating as navel-gazing Christians. Which brings me to the second thing he asks us to remember, and that's not just remember that we're a part of something bigger than ourselves, but remember Jesus. And it's how he frames Jesus here that I think's so important. What he says here is that Jesus is the author or the founder and perfecter of our faith. So here's why this matters as we think about the long journey home. And I mean giving your life to Christ and then living faithfully regardless of outcomes until he returns or we go home in glory. Your salvation was Jesus's idea. Not yours, his. You did not save you, he saved you. He is the author and the perfecter of your faith, according to the text. And the Apostle Paul would argue it this way in Philippians 1:6. And I am sure of this, that he who began the good work in you will be faithful to bring it to completion at the day of Jesus Christ. Now, let me tell you why that's important. If you miss that Jesus is the author and perfecter of our faith, the drift will be to put your faith in your faith rather than the object of your faith. Are you tracking with me? See, the strength of our faith is in our faith, but the object of our faith. If you're banking all of your security on your performance, you're going to enter what I call the cul-de-sac of stupidity. Here's what it looks like when you're doing good, you know what I'm saying? Like you just went to the fives and Kristen was on fire and somebody preached the word and you've got that weird that feeling. You're like, I'm never going to sin again. They're going to struggle again. I lay this down at your feet, Lord. This is never happening again. And then for the next 48 hours to week, depending on your willpower, you do really well, and then you stumble and fall. In that moment, is it your faith that holds you, or is it the object of your faith that holds you? Is the strength of your faith, or is the strength of your faith whom you put your faith in? See, the reason why the writer of Hebrews is saying, don't forget Jesus, is because if you continually are navel gazing, am I good enough? Am I performing well enough? Am I growing fast enough? Is my faith dynamic enough? Is it vibrant enough? Am I obeying all the things I should be? Am I not disobeying? If you get caught there, you will not run towards him. You will run from him. And then you get caught in that. I'm telling you, man, I've been pastor in the same church for 23 years. I've watched people do this now for 2 decades. Like when they're doing well, they kind of run near and then all of a sudden they vanish for a bit. And then they show back up and God does something and they get the kind of like goosebumps again for King Jesus, and then they're doing well for another 48 hours to a week. Then they run and fall away and kind of wild out for a little bit and circle back around, and here we are again. And it's crazy. Like a rope has no power unless it's tied to something solid. The point that the author of Hebrews is making is that faith does not exist to point to itself, but rather point to another. Like even Jesus says, you don't need a ton of faith. You just need like a mustard seed, just this tiny little bit of faith, but the object of your faith had better hold that little bit of faith. And so when the writer of Hebrews is saying, hey, remember Jesus, he is the foundation of, the founder of, and he is the one that's perfecting your faith, the more you have your eyes fixed on him, the more you're going to grow strong, and outcomes won't crush you or elate you. You will be steady in the love of Jesus because you know he started this. I didn't start this. I was a political science major. I was going to make a ton of money, drive a Porsche, and have a hot wife, maybe 2. And the Lord was like, I'm going to give you the hot wife. No Porsche. You can't drive a Porsche where I'm leading you. And this was a moment for me where do I want the life Christ has for me, or do I want the life that I want for me? And some of you are at that crossroads even now. Christ came and grabbed me. He pursued me. He wooed me. I didn't even know he was doing it. Like I had a friend bringing me to church. I thought it was the most kitschy, like bad Saturday Night Live sketch thing I'd ever been a part of. And then I kept coming back. Anybody? I mean, my buddy Jeff, I played ball with him, and by played with him, I mean we were on the same team. He would take me to church, and I just thought the whole thing was kitschy and corny. That's how I'm old. That's how I would say it. And I would say that to him on the way home. Then we'd get to my house. He's like, you want to come back next week? I was like, absolutely. Can you pick me up? I don't have a car. This is called theologically the effectual call of God. He was wooing me to himself. My salvation was not my idea. It was his. He saved me. He sustains me. He keeps coming after me. He has never let me go. I'm 33 years in, and he continually moves towards me. And his strength is why 33 years later, I still love him, follow him, worship him, and surrender my life to him. Not my strength. I would not have made, he has been my strength. And that's the point of this passage. But it's not just remembering, it's running. So let's look at this next part of the text. It's really fascinating here that he teases out this idea of lay aside, right? So if you go back, if you're looking at the text, here's what he says. Therefore, since we're surrounded by this great cloud of witnesses, and now here's our marching orders. Let us lay aside every weight and the sin which clings so closely. So the thing I think's fascinating about this passage is he teases out this idea of weight and sin. And really, I think the men and women who interpreted the ESV did not serve us well here, because they think this Greek word means lay aside, like you're putting up laundry, like fold that and just set it gently on the bed. No, this is like, get off me. It's like, get it off of you. Now, what's he saying? Get off of you. Anything that's a hindrance. Let me try to unpack what's going on. Like, this word hindrance is morally neutral lesser loves. It's not explicitly sinful stuff. It's stuff that robs us of a hunger and thirst for the beauty of Jesus Christ. It's not like blatant sinful wickedness. They're morally neutral good things. Good things God gave us in creation that were meant actually to stir us up to greater worship. The problem is we actually begin to worship those things. And as we worship those things, our soul, our spirit is satiated, and then we're not hungry for the things of God. Maybe this would be a good illustration. I know I'm in Georgia, so this will work. If I was up in Connecticut or something, I'd have to think of another one. I don't know if you've ever eaten at a Mexican food restaurant that has chips and salsa. That's a problem. That's a problem for me. If I do one, I'm doing 6 baskets. I got no willpower for chips and hot stuff. That stuff be calling me. And I have had on more than one occasion shown up hungry. And I got my drink, and here come the chips, and I've got the internal dialogue. And I convince myself I can just do one, maybe a few, maybe a basket, it's fine. And then they come by and I'm like, I got salsa on my face. They're like, what do you want? I'm like, I'm getting them beef fajitas. I'm getting that skirt steak, medium rare. Don't overcook my skirt steak now. Medium rare. And then bring that stuff out. They're gonna bring it on a sizzling platter. I don't know when that stuff hits your nostrils, glory. If you don't speak in tongues, you get a good fajita, you'll be speaking in tongues. And I've ordered I'm ready for the feast, man. Skirt steak, medium rare. Some guacamole on there. I'm gonna crush that. That's good fat. I'm gonna crush that. I'm gonna eat like, I'm ordering for 2. And then you gotta wait. I just keep pounding those chips. And then here comes my feast. You can hear it like a minute away. Coming to ruin my shirt by popping crab all on it. They bring that thing of fajita, bam, set it down in front of me. Oh man, and I take like 3 bites of that because I've had 9 baskets of chips. And I missed the feast for fried tortillas. This is what he's saying. Get that off of you. Whatever that is. Now, here's what's hard for us at church folk. Most of us haven't been trained to even think that way. But if you've been following the Lord for a while, here's my guess. If you're walking out in the parking lot tonight and somebody's like, say, man, you want some of this black tar heroin? Then you're not going to be like, should I? Second here, pros and cons. Cons, it's illegal. Pros, got a lot of work to do. I think that'll get me, I don't even know how heroin works, but you're not like kind of making this list of should I not? You don't do that, So the enemy's probably not coming at you like that. But what about binging the 8 seasons of Suits? Now, I'm sorry. I don't even know if it suits. Is it a thing? Does that work? Help me. I turned 50 this week. I don't know what's going on. What should I have used? Suits will work. It's fine. Maybe it's just my algorithm going, you'll like this. Right? But this is how the enemy gets us. Not with black tar heroin. With marinating in mediocrity. Like pulling us with lesser loves, satiating our spirit with nonsense so we're not hungry for the feast. So the author of Hebrews says, get that off you. Whatever that is, get that off of you. Lay it aside. Get it off. Whatever those morally neutral lesser loves are, they are stealing from you the joy of the feast of the presence of the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, who loves you and has moved towards you in his grace. So instead of the feast of his presence, that little bar just goes to the next episode. Or anybody guilty of doom scrolling? Like you just hop, and I know you are, don't lie. I know, I've seen the data. Like you're just gonna check something on the gram or TikTok for a second, then 4 hours later, you're watching something about robot rabbits or something, and you have no idea how you got there. This is what I'm talking about. It's things like that. They pull our attention, they pull our affection away from where it was designed to flow, and then we're not hungry anymore. But Jesus said, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. For they will be filled. Get it off of you. Morally neutral, lesser loves that satiate our spirit. Now, it's not just those hindrances, though. It's also sin. Now, I want to read this. This is Romans 13 through 14. And I'm just trying to get to the last little phrase, but I never want to do that out of context, so I want to give you a little context. Here's Romans 13 and 14. Let us walk properly as in the daytime, not in orgies and drunkenness, not in sexual immorality and sensuality, not in quarreling and jealousy, but put on the Lord Jesus Christ. And here's my phrase, and make no provision for the flesh to gratify its desires. Now I love that line, make no provision for the flesh. That means don't give it an inch. Don't give it an in. Like whatever you need to do to give no provision to the Don't give it an inch. Crush it, kill it, block it, whatever you have to do. He's saying, don't give it an inch. If you give it an inch, it'll own you. Don't give it any provision. Have you ever, and I know you haven't, let me just testify. There have been times in my life where I have justified my compulsions for things by thinking I'm more mature than I am. Thinking I've got more control than I do. So it's just a little, and I can justify what the Bible calls sin and categorize it as something else. It's called pride. It's one of the easiest things we get caught up in as human beings. But the Apostle Paul says, don't give it an inch. And so if you've got kind of a historic besetting sin in your life, I just want to be bold enough to ask you, how much space are you giving it in your life? How many doors have you given it to walk through? How many windows have you left cracked open just because you don't want to fully surrender that thing? Yeah, he's saying nail all the doors shut and board up the windows. Give no provision to the flesh. So he says, remember, right? Remember that you're a part of something bigger than yourself. Remember Jesus saved you and will sustain you and will hold you and will move towards you and loves you. You are his beloved. He has forgiven you. He's inviting you into his presence. Don't forget. And now let's run. But if you're going to run, you got to get some stuff off of you. You got to learn to feast in the presence of King Jesus. You got to learn to give no provision to the flesh. You got to put this stuff to death and walk in the light. And then he moves on to this next line, that you and I would run with endurance, the race marked out for us. So let's talk about endurance. Endurance is developed. I know if we just stop for a second, no thank you. Like the only way to develop endurance is to be resilient. The only way to be resilient is to suffer a little. It's the only way. And I like that the Bible doesn't apologize for it. Look, you're going to need some endurance. Now, I don't know how long you've been following Jesus. Like I said earlier, this past Monday was my 33rd spiritual birthday, and I'm telling you, I need some endurance. That there have been times that even as I've gazed upon the beauty of the Lord, I felt nearly out of gas, man. I felt. Will you forget me forever? Anybody read that psalm and be like, I've asked that question. No, just me? Thanks, God. It's great to be in Atlanta. And it's like, you in the South, bro. We don't struggle with that. Right? No, this is real. You're going to need endurance. Why? For the race that is set before you. So one of the things I'm trying to tell everyone, it's really why I wrote the book that Brett mentioned earlier. Like, this is the moment in history God has given to us. There's nobody coming to bail us out, nobody coming to help us. C.S. Lewis isn't about to kind of prop back up from the grave and write clever, subversive things for us to kind of leverage. G.K. Chesterton isn't going to show up and critique the modern political moment in a way that makes everybody giggle while slamming them. It's you and me. Like, we're God's big plan. And he's just not really anxious about that. Like, he's got his team on the field and he ain't too worried about it. Why? Because it ain't his team. It's the object of the faith of that team that makes all the difference. And Christ sits enthroned, victorious, at the center of reality right now. That is not a future occurrence. That's a present reality. And his presence is available to all who call on his name right now. Now let me conclude with this. I was speaking at a leadership retreat thing we do at our church. A couple times a year we take a group of leaders out and we just spend one-on-one time with them. And I was preaching at one of these. I got kind of the Saturday morning slot before we all head home. And I see Josh Patterson, who's one of our lead pastors. I'm one of three, and Josh is like one of the more gifted leaders I've ever been around. And he walks in and he whispers in the ear of a woman named Lindsay Inningenberg. And Lindsay gets up and they walk out, and I know that's never good news. So Lindsay handles a lot of crisis communication for us. And so I knew something not good has just happened. So I finish my sermon. And then I go try to see what's going on. And they let me know that a very good friend of mine who had been in ministry for well over 2 decades had just been exposed for some pretty heinous, horrific sins. A guy I have been on the stage with, one of the more gifted, anointed men I had ever been around, who for 2 decades had hidden behind the curtain of his life heinous, wicked sin, destroyed his life, destroyed much of his wife's ministry, and shipwrecked all that God had done up until that point. And my heart sank. Years ago, I was watching TV when you did that, before you had to get 40 different streaming services to see everything. And there was this show on television back in the day called When Animals Attack. Now it's just a YouTube clip, but back then it was like a whole show. It was like an hour, When Animals Attack. And I'm gonna just confess to you, because I love you, I'm always rooting for the animal. Because like it's like the grizzly bear guy, man. It's just like, what are you doing? And so right before they went to commercial, am I being too transparent here? Do I need to be godlier? Okay. And so like they're going to this commercial break, right? And before they do it, they're like, up next on When Animals Attack. And they just showed like this giant male lion and this woman in a bikini. And I was like, oh gosh, this is going to be awesome. And so I watch, and it's a shampoo commercial, Maine, get it? And they have this male lion, this giant apex predator. I mean, God just made this thing to kill stuff. It has no enemy but man. And then they've got this, little model, and they make this male lion lay down, and then they have her like lean against him holding a thing of shampoo. I think you could probably YouTube this later. Not now, I'm preaching. Now, the show's called When Animals Attack, so you know where I'm going. So they're filming this, and this lion just works this woman over. And the trainer's like pulling a chain, like, what? It's an apex predator, man. You're pulling a chain? And they finally get this lion off this woman, and they're interviewing him as a part of When the Animals Attack show. And this guy, like, his brain is bent that this lion did this. And so here's what he says. He's like, I've hand-raised this lion since it was a cub. I can't believe this happened. And all I'm thinking is, I can believe it happened. Like, I've already kind of let out my love for fajitas. You put a fajita in front of me, I might not eat it right now. I'm full, I already ate a little something. But you leave that fajita there, eventually I'm taking a bite out of that fajita. And now you're gonna put this woman on an apex predator and just hope it works out? Well, it doesn't, but here's how I wanna land the plane. This brother thought because he had control when it was a cub, that he would have control when it was full grown. Nearly got a woman killed. And here's what I want to say to you. Some of you right now, you got little pet lions in your life. It's just some morally neutral thing, but it's got you. And you're just like, it's so cute. It's not, oh my gosh, it's just Suits. Or some of you have real, present, and pervasive secret sin. And it just feels, I get it, I've been there, guys, where you just feel like you got control. I can stop when I want. I've got this thing under control. And yet the Bible repeatedly warns that not only will our sin find us out, but that if we're not careful, it will devour us. And so the author of Hebrews says, drag the little baby lion out in the street and kill it. Don't think that you're going to have control of this thing. Don't think even now you have control on these. So the stuff that we're supposed to get off of us, the stuff that hinders and the sin that clings so closely. I love that descriptor. I felt that. Like, how do I get this out of me? How do I get this off of me? This is real spiritual danger for the man or woman who wants to faithfully and wholeheartedly follow Jesus Christ, wants to experience his presence and love, wants to be set free in all the broken bondage that happens in the human soul. The offer is freedom. But some of us find a hard time grabbing hold of it because spiritually we're already satiated with morally neutral, lesser. We just crushed that, that chips and hot sauce. And we just have no hunger left for the things of God, even as we can see that we're not thriving like Christ promised that we would thrive. We've got little sins in our lives that we think we've got control. It's like, oh my gosh, look how cute he is. He's a baby lion. And that only ends one way. So the writer of the book of Hebrews calls us to fear the Lord, trust in his goodness, and move towards his grace. Now, what does that look like? Well, the great tools of intimacy with Jesus are ongoing confession and repentance for all of life. So confession and repentance, they're not this thing we do one time to get in the club. No, it's an ongoing ethic where repeatedly I'm bringing my lesser loves to him and going, I'm starting to like this a little bit more than I should. I need this to help me worship you. I don't need this to be the place I'm finding comfort, or I'm finding purpose, or I'm finding meaning, or I'm finding peace, or I want to find that in you. And let this point me to you. Don't let this be the thing that all my spiritual hunger terminates on. Or it's me approaching men and women who I know and love Jesus and going, I got a lion situation, I need you to help me kill it. And not that kind of pretend thing where, man, you got like a full-grown 600-pound lion, but what you confess is he's just a little cub. No, it needs to be the full nastiness of it. I've got a lion, I got lions wreaking havoc in my world. I'm afraid it's going to destroy me. I need to expose it for what it is and put it to death. And so as we move into this evening, this is the opportunity I want to lay in front of you, the opportunity that the Word of God lays in front of you. Therefore, since we're surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race marked out for us. Let us fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, whom for the joy set before him endured the cross, scorning its shame, and is seated at the right hand of the Father, where the Apostle Paul says he makes intercession for us. So I want you to do me a favor. I want you to just bow your heads and close your eyes. We're almost there, guys. Thank you for putting up with me. I just want to ask some questions. I think that there are times that we have to get our bodies involved in our worship and interaction with the Lord. And so I'm just going to ask a couple of simple questions. You don't need, it's just going to be me looking around, but you don't need to worry about me. I'm on a plane back to Dallas tomorrow. We might not see each other again until glory. I want this to be a moment between you and the Lord. If you're in here tonight and you would say, man, I've got some morally neutral, lesser loves that are absolutely killing my appetite for the presence of Jesus. If that's you, just lift your hand high like you're not Baptist. That's awesome. Yeah, all over the room. You're not alone. All over the room. This is a thing that happens to us. By the grace of God, he helps us see it. Okay, go ahead and put your hands down. Now, how many of you in here would say, oh man, I've got a little bit of that? But Chandler, I got a lion issue in my life. Like this isn't, I got some secret besetting sin that hardly nobody on earth knows. And I know I have been trying to wrestle this lion, been trying to kill this lion for as long as I can remember, man. And I feel outmatched and overwhelmed by the lions in my life right now. My thing ain't morally new.